Hello, it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we all know what that means. Another riveting episode of Behind Breaking Bond. You're obviously watching this because you care about this particular issue, and you can make a difference come November during the election. Introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm back.
Yes, you are.
Did you miss me?
I did.
We did. So I am back, Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services, Victim Advocacy for Crime Stoppers.
Very well. Joining us is Bill King. Bill King, for folks who aren't familiar with it, tell us about Bill King.
Well, I've been a lifelong Houstonian. I was a mayor down in Kemah, Texas for a while. Ran for mayor of Houston back in 2015, 2019. I was on Crime Stoppers board for many years and still a big supporter of the organization.
You recently wrote an article. Tell us about that.
Well, I heard this story about this, poor constable who got shot up in the Atascocita area, and he was not on duty. He had gone out to get takeout for his family, and along that trip, something happened. We still don't know exactly what, but he was shot and killed while he was driving his car. Some people witnessed it. The car ran off the road, hit a tree. By the time emergency got there, he passed. And then quickly after that, two young men were arrested for the murder. Both of them were out on bond for murder, one of them a capital murder. And the bonds had been reduced. It was just, they should have never let on bond, period.
And that's,
not under the circumstances they were.
And that's sort of the issue that we keep talking about.
I've been around a while. So the guy that was on bond for capital murder was actually originally set at $200,000. So the magistrate agreed with what the district attorney's office recommended. And then I saw something I hadn't seen before. I actually saw the judge reverse the $200,000 order and actually reduce it to 75. And that really piqued my interest because usually it's the other way around. A judge will increase what the magistrate originally orders, but this was totally the opposite. And then the other defendant that was out on bond. Now I've seen low bonds for murders. I've seen $50,000 bond for murders, but I've never seen in at least over a decade a $35,000 bond for a murder suspect. So you had two things that really stood out to me on this case. And then as we get delved deeper and deeper, the one particular guy had been revoked, and you and I've done these stories many times, revoked and reinstated within 3 days. All he did was increase the bond. And there used to be an adage in Harris County, it was one bond per customer.
Right.
You were on a bond, and your bond, especially if you got charged with an additional crime, which is what this guy actually was,
Yeah.
you weren't getting back out again.
And a judge does have the power to say, Andy Kahn, you did not abide by the conditions of your bond. I'm revoking the bond. Judges have the power to do that. We have judges now that they kind of they give this impression that, my hands are tied. I can't do that. I can't do that. I got to give everybody a bond. Got to get everybody a bond. No judge has to give a capital murder defendant bond today.
Capital murder is the only offense in the statute in which a judge can actually deny bond. That's it. And that didn't happen in this case. And I'll just call it like it is. A decision to reduce that bond more than likely cost the off-duty deputy his life.
Well, and we've seen 181 Harris County residents who are no longer with us because they were allegedly killed by defendants, repeat violent offenders who are walking around the streets on multiple felony bonds. You've been around a while. I know you're not as old as me, but in the past, did you ever see that? Did you ever see instances where a defendant would be out on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 bonds?
No, I always had the impression when Andy said it was one and done or one per customer. You got out once, but if you messed up while you were out, that was it. You're going to sit in jail until you had your trial, which is sort of a common sense rule.
Right.
And Kim Ogg in her report on bail bonds back in September last year showed very clearly the graphics on this, the number of people out on felony bonds that were recommitted. And there used to be like 3,000 a year, and now there's 15,000 a year or something like that.
So
something dramatically has happened. One thing I think is important on this case that, we're talking about here with the constable that was murdered out there. We talk about these bonds and it sounds like a lot of money, but I'm not sure everybody understands. They don't have to come up with all of that money to get out. At most, they generally have to put up about 10%.
Correct, yeah.
So in the case of these two bonds, you're talking about these two guys got out of jail for at a maximum of about $20,000. And some of the bail bondsmen have been discounting that
Yes.
and financing it. And so they may have gotten out even for less than that. So here's a couple of people that are accused of very serious crimes, incredibly accused. These were not, there was a
They're on bond for murder and capital murder.
Right, yeah,
and there was a lot of evidence against them in the previous murders. It wasn't like it was some kind of a setup deal. And they both get out for something less than $20,000.
And and in a way, when you think about it, everybody deserves to be out on bond while they're awaiting trial. There's no doubt about it. But it's almost a privilege in a way. You're kind of saying, all right, I get to be free for a while, but I understand that there are rules and there are conditions that I must abide by.
Well, look, the Supreme Court has addressed this. There is a constitutional right, the Texas Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. The Supreme Court has said that is contingent on you not being a flight risk, that you'll actually show up for trial.
Right.
And secondly, are you a danger to society? Those are the two exceptions the Supreme Court has clearly stated. And the judicial officers in charge is supposed to make a determination about those things, decide whether or not they're a flight risk and whether or not they're going to do something if they get out. And those are the bases that the Supreme Court says you can deny bond. Now, Texas statute restricts that a little bit, but that's the basic test. And I'll tell you the truth, look, I know Crime Stoppers has said this for a long time. I don't like cash bonds. I don't like the whole system, especially in the misdemeanor. I don't think anybody ought to be sitting in jail for a hot check or possession of marijuana.
Yeah, shoplifting from Target.
50 years ago, the federal system got rid of cash bonds altogether.
Right.
And every federal defendant goes through a quantitative, qualitative analysis of are you a flight risk and are you a danger to society? And if you can't answer the right way to those, you don't get out. You have to sit in jail and wait for your trial in the federal system.
And those are the two most important things to consider, right?
They're the two things the Supreme Court says trump your right to bail. You don't have a right to bail if the judge believes you're not going to show up for trial, or if the judge thinks that if the judge, he or she lets you out, that you're going to go hurt somebody else.
Right. And the thing too, and we've talked about this a lot, the whole system of being out on bond is not supposed to last for years.
Right.
And you've got all of these people that are spending years out on bond, they're picking up additional charges, and you've got to wonder when the day comes, are they actually going to go face trial?
Look, this backlog of cases, I think
100,000 plus.
Yeah.
Kim said 3 or 4 years for a felony trial now.
Right.
That's not good for anybody in the system. It's not fair for defendants. It's not fair for the victims. It's not fair to the public. It is an absolute application of the duty of judicial officers there to move it. And if they can't get this, then we need to put more judges down there. But we cannot have a system where it takes 3 or 4 years to determine guilt and innocence.
I just talked to a family this week, and it was a very high-profile case in Houston. It was like the Subway murders at the Subway sandwich shop in 2017, where the young man shielded his mother from getting shot, and he ended up losing his life. There was a lot of media coverage of this case. He's charged with murder. The case was dismissed last week. And the reason it was dismissed is they can't find the witnesses.
Right.
The witnesses are gone. And I'm going, you're going to see more and more of scenario because it's been 5 years since this took place. And if you can't have the witness, you don't know where they are, you can't try the case. That's just fact.
I mean, the longer time goes by, it's hard, right? I mean, you're talking about cases like that one getting dismissed, or they're not going to go to trial because too much time has passed.
I tried a lot of civil cases in my career, and I can tell you the further you get away from the events, the less likely you are to recreate what actually happened at that point in time. Because witnesses go away. They go with both sides. They go with the prosecution and defense. It's not fair to either side. have these cases delayed like this.
I mean, what do you think should happen down at the courthouse? Do you think they should just try to have 24-hour court? Or what do you think the answer is?
Well, of course, they stopped having any kind of cases during the pandemic.
Right.
And all that, and then they had the holiday. There's reasons that contribute to this, but also we need to have, we used to, back when I was practicing civil law, we used to have a list of which judges had the biggest backlogs.
Yeah.
I would like for the public to know that. Are there some judges that have bigger backlogs than others?
Well, what was it? I guess maybe a year or so ago, we were looking at how many trials some judges had, and you had judges that had only maybe 3 or 4, where you had other judges, 12, 14. I mean, the numbers were
I
way.
think everybody in the criminal justice system, including members of the Commissioner's Court, Sheriff, and Mayor, have all said, you got to get out of this 8 to 5, 9 to 5. You gotta
Attitude,
start going outside the box. There's no reason in the world that we can't have night courts, weekend courts. I think everybody has to realize there's a problem, and the problem isn't going to get solved by the normal routine.
How
You
can it
you
ever?
you can bring retired judges, visit.
Yeah,
judges.
right,
If
yes.
you really cared about trying to get this backlog, there's plenty of ways to address it. If we need more courts, let's go to the legislature and tell them we need more courts next time.
We had
There's a lot of
one
things.
additional court in 40 years
That-
in Harris County.
How can that be,
That's insane.
It
You know,
is.
think about the highways and the road. We added additional roads, highways to adjust.
Yeah.
Let me throw in another part of that. I'm just going about this a little off the mark maybe, but this idea of electing judges, and especially electing them on a partisan ballot,
Right.
is a terrible idea. Because look, I practiced law in this county for 30 or 40 years. I'm not competent to go in and look at, how many 30, 40 judges be on the ballot this time,
Right.
and know which ones are doing a good job and which ones are doing a bad job.
Right.
And then, so what people do is they go in and they look at a party affiliation and they say, well, I don't think about them, but I'm an R, I'm a D, so I'll vote that way. And when you do that, you end up with some real knuckleheads on the bench.
And that's something we have got to get away from this November. It's like we've repeatedly told people, when it comes to judges, go all the way down the ballot. And when you start seeing criminal district court judges, don't look for the R and don't look for the D. More than likely, you do not want to vote for the incumbent. I mean, I'm sorry, but those are the judges that we've been doing stories on.
This election cycle, you'll have more attention paid on judicial races than you've ever had.
I do
before
too.
In Harris County because of what we've seen.
But Andy, unless
Right.
people that are familiar
Right.
with the system like you get information out there. Because, I was talking to Gary Pollen the other day, a good friend of yours, and Gary said, look, Bill, there are some good Democratic
Agreed.
judges.
Yes,
And so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
right.
I think that we need to try to come up with, those of us that are interested, in some kind of consensus about these are the judges that we recommend. And I know Crime Stoppers can't do that.
Right.
There's no reason why people like I can't do it or Gary can't
And
do
the
it.
union is the
The
police union
came
is
out with
doing
an
it.
endorsement, and that also includes Democrat judges, much
Yes.
to everybody's
Yes.
surprise.
Yeah.
They do have certain Democrat judges that are running for reelection that the HPOU has endorsed.
And one of the things that we're going to do on Breaking Bond is when it gets closer to the election,
It's
we're just,
getting real close.
it is, we got to get on that.
It's-
We're not
Right.
we're not going to do a Breaking Bond saying, hey, this is who you need to vote for. What we're going to do is we're going to refresh your memory. Remember, we told you this many judges had defendants who went on to allegedly commit murder. We're just going to kind of refresh you on, because some judges we've obviously done more Breaking Bonds on than others.
It's good for the public to see who's running for office. And
Yes.
during the primary season, we had a lot of judicial candidates in the Democrat primary that came, sitting right where you are, Bill, that came and spoke with us
Yes.
about that. And I think that's a great thing, and we'll do the
And by
same
the
thing.
way, the Democratic voters threw a number of these people out of office, some of the most egregious. The 2 judges that were involved in that Atascocita, both of them got beat in the Democratic
Yeah.
primary, which I thought was quite.
Have you ever seen, and we talked about this, months ago in the primary, I've never really seen a primary that was contested with incumbent judges before until this. It's very rare.
Right.
It's extremely rare. The only time you ever saw it that I can think of before was when some kind of scandal involved.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
But I
yeah.
think there were 7 Democratic judges that were defeated in the
Yes.
primary.
When
Yeah.
you add both the misdemeanor and the felony court judges, you are correct. I've not seen contested races like I have in the primary, which tells me that the Democrat Party also recognized that there's some issues and they had other candidates run.
And you have people that are starting to realize this is not, these judicial races, you should not look at them from, well, I'm a Republican, so I got to vote for all the Republicans, or I'm a Democrat, I got to vote for all the Democrats. That's not what this is. Anybody, no matter what political, whether you're Republican, independent, whatever, a killer or a robber, they don't care. They're not going to ask you, right? They're not going to say, well, if you're a Democrat, I'm not going to shoot you.
You're right.
I mean, right.
In a quote utopian world, we wouldn't have party affiliation with who's on the bench, but that's not going to happen this election
Not
cycle.
right.
But let me tell you, Texas is an outlier in the country for having this kind of system.
Yeah.
I mean, we really are, and we've been talking about reforming the judicial selection in the state for decades, and we need to get on with it.
Well,
It's
and
giving you a bunch of bad results.
And you look at, historically, the family court system in Harris County has been questioned by a lot of people because you have judges that, well, I'm the judge and you're my friend and you donated to my campaign, so I'm going to appoint you to ad litem to all the cases. And right, I mean, there's a lot of this, you scratch mine, I'm going to scratch yours. And I don't know why should you even have that in a judicial setting?
It's just,
right?
It's an invitation to corruption.
It is.
Or at least undue influence. I mean,
Right.
How do you sit there as a judge and you've taken a bunch of $1,000 campaign contributions from this lawyer in front,
Right.
and that not somehow affect even if you're completely dead honest, how's that not going
Yeah.
to somehow color your judgment the way you view the case?
And why would you even want somebody to be able to bring it up? I mean, the system shouldn't be that way where that becomes a question. And
If I'm running a campaign ad, that's what I'm saying. X amount of judge received X amount of contributions, right, from this. Is this who you really want looking at your, right?
right.
Well, like I say, we're essentially the only state that does this.
Yeah.
I mean, we are
I did not know
the
that.
outlier in the rest of the country in doing this. Most other states have some sort of, more like the federal system, they're appointed by the governor or by a judicial commission, and they've got to be approved by some branch of the legislature, something like that.
What do you think it would take for Texas to join the rest of the country in this? What would it?
It'd take our state leadership deciding to make a change.
Yeah. And you, again, and I'm not, it's been a long time since I've been down at the family court system doing stories, but for years I have. And it's, I mean, I'm sorry, but there's just this whole, if you're a family law attorney, you're going to pretty much have to give contributions to the judges.
When I was practicing law, and I'm sitting there, and I get a fundraising email from some judge that I know I've got a case in. What am I going to say? Screw you. I'm not going to give you any money. It's not like you really judge. And by the way, the judges are really in the same situation because they've got to go run for it. So they've got to have money.
Right.
I mean, these guys don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so they've got to go ask for money. Well, nobody's going to give money except the people that are interested.
Right.
So
it's a necessary evil for them to say, give me money.
It is a systemic problem.
It is.
It's not just that there's a bunch of bad people. This is a bad system.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not saying that there are judges down there that are making decisions based on people who gave them money. But just the idea that someone could look at that scenario and say,
that's how our system's been for decades and centuries. So that's just reality, human nature in itself. And unless you change the process, it will continue to happen.
Right.
Well, I am appointing Bill King to change all that. I'll give you a week. You come back.
No problem.
You come back next Tuesday. Tell us how
You
we're
heard it
going.
here first.
That's right. That's right. Hey, thank
What
you.
do we got tonight? We got real interesting.
This is, I would
I
say,
keep saying we keep finding. I've never seen this
but
before.
it's
and
true.
I sound like a parrot all
but
the
it's
time.
true. It's true. Little T's, honest to God truth, it's on documents.
That's news lingo. watch this segment tonight.
Right. A capital murder defendant gets a $9,000 bond. Is that the lowest you've ever seen there, Randy?
There's little lower you can, I don't know how much lower you
So
can
that
get.
means he could get out for $900.
$900, right,
Sure.
$900. $900 and a capital murder, someone who's facing the possibility of a sentence of life or death, will just get out on $900. It'll all be good. Hey, be sure to tune in tonight at 9. Thank you so much for watching the live stream. It's on the Fox 26 YouTube channel. Please share it with all of your friends, and thank you for caring about this subject matter. See you.